Hello, and welcome to episode 2 of the Doctor Who Book Club second inaugural episode. We're still going going strong. Initially, I wasn't sure if I wanted to include this, because this is like a weird thing. It's not really like a book. So what are these? These are the Sweet Cadet candy cigarette cards. Not sure how much I'm allowed to say the word cigarette on YouTube. It might get flagged. I don't know. But if you don't remember candy cigarettes, I don't think they really sell them that much anymore, because obviously the optics of it's like, well, you're promoting cigarettes to kids. But they're basically like little like white sugar candy cigarettes. I remember them. I actually used to like them, weirdly. But I don't know, they did taste kind of bland, but for some reason I bought them all the time. I remember buying them all the time. There was a particular variety of these in England, of course, in Great Britain, that they basically included these Doctor Who cards. Now, the story that this is basically called Doctor Who and the Daleks. Basically, the story may a lot of the early stories we're going to cover have something to do with the Daleks. There's a lot of stories called Doctor Who and the Daleks. There's the original TV story. I mean, we read the Dalek book. Doesn't have Doctor Who in it. I believe the TV movie is called Doctor Who and the Daleks, or it's just called Doctor Who. I don't know the Peter Cushing one. But this story is also called Doctor Who and the Daleks. And I'm covering this. I don't know. I read through it. I thought it was like, it is interesting enough, I think, to talk about. There's a few interesting things in here to cover, but it's basically like they were collectible cards, and there's 50 of them. So each time you bought a pack of these candy cigarettes, you would get one card, and you would try to collect all 50 cards to get the complete story. Okay, so the way this, if you see this is the front of the card. This is the back of the card. The back of the card had the story on it. Front of the card had an illustration. Now, there's a few things worth noting here. I am covering this second, even though I don't have like an exact date of when this would have been released. The best I can do is that it was released sometime in 1964. But I'm doing it second to the Dalek books because it mentions the Vord, which are not mentioned in the Dalek. The Dalek book is purely the Daleks, and the Dalek story was first. But we have the Vord in here, which means we're at least past the Keys of Marinus story. Early on, and even in like audio stories and audio dramas that try to return to this era, love to use the Vord. They like to use the Vord a lot because they kind of, when they did the Keys of Marinus story, they expected fully that or at least hoped, that the Vord would be just as popular as the Daleks, that they would have like this massive hit on their hands, and people would be just obsessed about the Vord, just as obsessed about the Vord as they were about the Daleks. Obviously, this didn't happen, and that's, I mean, you can tell by the fact that like anybody who's watching modern Doctor Who, probably, I mean, if you're not familiar with the classic era, you've never heard of the Vord. I guarantee you've never heard of the Vord. And in reading some of the trivia about the Vord, I have come to know some interesting things. There are some stories, some prose stories out there that basically claim that the Vord eventually evolved into the Cybermen, or kind of proto-Cybermen. There's some stories that support that. I don't know that the canon really like claims that that's the case. It's never, like I said, the Vord have just never come back in the canon, so it's hard to say if that's like a for sure thing, but there's like a couple stories that kind of claim that, and it's supported a little bit by the fact that like Marinus and Mundus are maybe a little similar. Like Marinus, the Vord like renamed their home planet to Mundus, home of the Cybermen, or at least the Mundasian Cybermen. It's a lot to unpack. I'm not going to get into that. But it's a theory, it's a fan theory out there that maybe the Vord are just proto-Cybermen. Maybe that's what they are. I don't know. Who knows? You know. So maybe they do appear in the modern canon as Cybermen, as Mundazian Spider-Man. But a couple things, and I'm going to move past this first card in a second here. But all throughout this story, the Doctor is referred to as Doctor Who, although they do use quotations here, Doctor Who. Obviously, it's you know, if you're a mega nerd, you're going to be like, his name's not Doctor Who, that's not his name. His name is the Doctor. But a lot of these stories in canon don't really care. They're going to call him Doctor Who. It just is what it is. That's what they do. Okay. There's a couple things in here. So the first part of this story, basically, the Daleks are on planet Marinus, and they're fighting the Vords for some reason. And Doctor Who is there. And okay, so if we try to fit this into a canon storyline, there's a couple things we have to take note of. The first thing to note is that this is more than likely the first Doctor, right? Now, obviously, with modern canon, we have the Timeless Child whole thing. I'm not going to try to unpack that, okay, and try to claim this is like some other... Like, it's more than likely that the way the Doctor looks in this, let's just assume this is the first Doctor, okay? Now, how do you place this in the timeline? Because he's traveling alone, which is interesting, because the first Doctor never really has a point at which he is fully alone. So from what I've read, there are some people who try to place this storyline, if they do try to place it, which you don't really have to, but some people are dedicated. Some people really want to make everything canon as best they can, and I like that. I applaud that. I love that idea. That's part of why I'm doing this. You know, if I didn't think any of this stuff mattered, I wouldn't talk about it, but I think it does matter. I think it's fun to think that it matters, right? There's a few theories. You could think that this may be somewhere in the timeline, the Doctor just traveled alone for a bit, the first Doctor, maybe in between storylines. I mean, the Doctor can easily... There are times in the first Doctor's canon, even in a lot of the prose, a lot of the audiobooks, sometimes the Doctor maybe takes the TARDIS and just, like, goes somewhere and then comes back, right? And it's like, oh, well, maybe during that time he went on a billion different adventures, you know? It happens. It's not the hardest thing to, like, explain. But there is a site that I quite appreciated for a long period of time that tried to, like, put out, like, a complete Doctor Who canon. And it's a site called iSpider. I don't know if that's just a hosting site, but if you search iSpider Doctor Who, you should find this website. And I used to scour over this website because I thought it was so fascinating. It's just one guy who's just trying to place a bunch here. I'll pull it up, actually. All right, I'm having some issues with full screen for some reason. My screen just goes black whenever I go to full screen. Don't know why, but so this guy basically just took all of just anything he could find, short stories, Big Finish audios. This is a novel, a Telos novella, painting book. This is literally a drawing book, a picture book that has a story in it. And he's just tried to, like, line up everything that he can find in the canon. And this is a comic, Doctor Who Magazine comic. And these are the episodes. And he's just tried to create a complete timeline. This is fascinating. I love when people do stuff like this. This is just crazy to me. So if you'll look, this is the story we're currently talking about. And it's Cadet Sweet Cigarette Cards. And in his theory, acting as a Time Lord ambassador, the Doctor undertakes 2 missions involving the Vord and the Daleks. I actually agree with that assessment. I was going to say the same thing. It's basic. This is like 2 stories, kind of. So this is his explanation of why he did this. The notion of the Doctor serving... as an ambassador as precedent in the series, presumably seen in the capacity that first met Dastari. In the 2 missions presented here, the TARDIS is nowhere to be seen. Presumably, the Doctor travels by time ring. First mission, he's dressed in some sort of spacesuit. Second assignment could be some considerable time later. The Doctor is now adept at an Edwardian costume. The fact that he encounters the Daleks here and indeed makes peace with them is forgotten later on. So that's his explanation, okay? He's like, well, the Doctor maybe was acting as an ambassador in this capacity, and, like, because this takes place well before the Daleks, which is here, this is the Daleks, he just forgot. They just forgot that he met them before. So that's the explanation. And he forgot that he met the Vord before, which is Keys of Marinus, which is, let me find it. I went way too far. I have to, like, identify this by episode titles. This is the Keys of Marinus, which, as you can tell, it's not that far off. So there's 2 stories: Edge of Destruction, Brink of Disaster, and then this is I believe Marco Polo, and then this is the Keys of Marinus here. So before that, anyway, that's his theory about how this place is. The Doctor was acting as an ambassador in this capacity. I don't know if it, like, really makes sense, because obviously he had to write a bunch of stuff to, like, make this happen, but we could go with that theory, sure. Who knows? Anyways, the Vord are searching, the Vords are planning to travel, the Vords? Vords? I believe the Vord already is plural. The Vords? Daleks are fighting the Vords. Who knows? They're on Marinus. Doctor Who shows up. He's like, what are you guys doing? And the Vords, apparently, are planning to travel to Earth to find a mysterious power. And then the Daleks and the Vords team up against Doctor Who, and they're going to try to find this mysterious power, okay? That's basically the essence of story 1. They capture the Doctor, and they use him to disclose the secret of Ultron travel, Ultra Chronos, beyond time, which is above speed of light. Sure. That's what so they need him to construct a spaceship that can travel faster than the speed of light beyond time. So it's not a time-traveling ship, but it's called Ultra Chronos, but it's above the speed of light. But, I mean, Einsteinian theory, I believe, would basically mean that if you're traveling above the speed of light, you would be time-traveling either way. So, who knows? So he makes a time-traveling spaceship for them, I guess? And he has that knowledge? I guess? Sure. Let's move past it, okay? So, the Doctor escapes, okay? He pulls a lever. He escapes. Just happens. He's able to pull this lever. But he sends a message to Earth. Now, it's interesting that he's sending a message to Earth. Why would he, if he was acting in ambassadorial status, why would he send a message to Earth? We're assuming he would be acting as an ambassador of the Time Lords, not an ambassador of Earth, because he doesn't land on Earth until 1963. Well, he lands on Earth in the year 1963, but, like, is he aligned with Earth? Like, at that point, he's very standoffish and kind of keeping to himself. He's got a time machine. He doesn't want to tell anybody about it. I don't think it makes much sense, but I guess maybe I don't know. I guess he knows that they're heading to Earth, so he's, like, sending them a warning, I suppose. Card number 7 says, what planet are they making for? They're making for Earth. He knows that. It says it in the other cards, but warn all planets, I guess, which implies that the Earth, maybe this is a future in which the other planets in the solar system are inhabited by other humans. I mean, we find in the Dalek book that is the case. In that version of the future, all of the other planets are inhabited, so that's possible, and we are in that timeline that we are actually, you know, pretty close to when that story took place. But he does get captured by the Daleks again. Now, I want to mention that I'm trying not to show all of the cards. I don't know how copyright is going to, like, kill me on this, and it's going to be a problem in the future, I think, to show a lot of stuff. Might have been a problem with the Dalek book, but obviously you can't just, like, you know, I can't just show you everything. So I'm showing you bits and pieces. I'm trying to skip stuff, okay? Please bear in mind, I don't know why it should matter. These are like candy cigarette cards. Who cares? Who owns the rights to these? I don't know. But I don't want to get in trouble if I can avoid it. So I'm going to skip a few of these, okay? So essentially the Doctor gets captured by the Daleks, and he overhears that the Daleks are going to betray the Vord, I guess, for this mysterious power. So he basically gets captured by the Vord and tells the Vord, this chief Vord, and then they basically decide that they're gonna fight back against the Daleks. So the Daleks and the Vord, they fight. Doctor Who escapes in an escape pod. And then in his escape pod, the Chief Vord was in the escape pod and then attacks him. And then they find out that this knowledge, this power that they're seeking is from Earth. Okay? So they need to go to Earth in order to get this power that we, you know, it says C card 1. That's what we learned about in the first card. That's what their Vord were after the whole time. This power is apparently in the South American jungle. I like how it says the exact area must be left vague, as if they're, like, implying this is a real thing. And we can't tell you where this mysterious power is located, but trust us, it's somewhere in the South American jungle. It's the power of infinite knowledge or something. So they land in the jungle. Doctor he rescues the Vord. And the Vord agrees to help him. Turns out that the power they were looking for was a type of mushroom used by Inca priests, so ancient Incans, and it gives superhuman powers, I guess. The Doctor, he says, well, I can't let the Daleks have that. That would be real bad, right? So essentially, the Chief Vord agrees to help the Doctor and convinces the Daleks that deadly mushrooms are the mushrooms they're looking for instead of the actual mushrooms they're looking for. But these mushrooms weirdly seem to power up the Daleks, so the Doctor is, in a moment, unsure if the Vord, the Chief Vord, actually just betrayed him. But it turns out the Chief Vord did not betray the Doctor, and actually did give them the deadly mushrooms, and they do die, but not before they take out a whole bunch of human fighters, and also the Chief Vord is unfortunately killed in the fight as well. But I say unfortunately, but it kind of, you know, cleans up the loose ends a little bit. But, you know, I don't, that's not very doctorly of me to say. So that's essentially, card number 25 is essentially like the end of the first story. The Daleks trying to find this mushroom, betraying the Vord, who are looking for it first. And then they get foiled by the Vord, finding out that they were going to betray them, and then they betray them, and they betray each other, and then the Daleks get defeated by a deadly mushroom. So the second story is essentially there's a spaceship, they find a Dalek, and then bizarrely it says the President and Council. I don't know what that means. The President of what? The President of the USA? President of Earth? The President. And they bring in Doctor Who, I guess, who has, like, a relationship with the President. I don't know. Also, this is like it's a future. Look at him wearing, like, a weird cape. And the Dalek clearly just wants to talk to the Doctor. So, as it turns out, basically, weirdly enough, this is actually kind of an interesting plot point, is that Skaro and the Emperor Dalek, who, if we remember, when I was talking about the Dalek book, the Emperor Dalek was introduced in the Dalek book, but not in the show. There was no Emperor Dalek introduced in the show yet. But in this, we still have an Emperor Dalek. It seems like, I have to say, it seems like the same people who wrote the Dalek book wrote this. Okay? Wrote this story, which is really actually kind of fascinating. But essentially, Skaro is under attack by some sort of mysterious... They have a mysterious problem, and they actually are they send this lone Dalek to find the Doctor to, like, help them, to come back to Skaro to, like, help the Daleks, which is so bizarre. At least in the modern, in modern Doctor, in Doctor Who in general, to think that think of the Doctor like helping the Daleks, or the Daleks seeking out the Doctor to help them, is bizarre. It's so strange. They would never do that, right? But in this story, that's exactly what they do. They're like, well, he would be able to save us. And I like this card in particular because it actually references the Dalek book. So they crash land on the land in the area of the monsters of Skaro. So this is Skaro. There's an area. Okay, if you go back to my Dalek book episode, episode 1, there's a map, and there is a map, and on the map it shows an area where there are only monsters. So he is landing in that area that is referenced in the Dalek book. I find that it's bizarre. This is so strange to me that this is like referencing the Dalek book, which is already like an obscure piece of media, and this is an obscure piece of media referencing another obscure piece of media. That's so strange. But this is the kind of stuff I live for. This is what makes this fun, right? So they save Doctor Who. He's been attacked by the monsters. They send a squadron. They save him. They bring him to the Dalek Emperor. And it turns out, what did they do? They built a super machine brain, but it's gone out of control. Can Doctor Who find a way of destroying it? So what is this super brain? So essentially, this is like they created something like, I guess what they say. I have to go back. Yeah, Emperor tells Doctor Who that the scientists who built it ordered it to produce great quantities of neutronium. They say scientists. I'm guessing they're talking about Dalek scientists, which is again a kind of bizarre concept, right? To think of a Dalek scientist. It's not really what the Daleks do. But I guess Dalek scientists created this machine, this brain, that's supposed to create this nuclear substance called neutronium, I guess. Because it's to power things, I guess. Oh, no, actually, you know what? I was wrong. It was not Dalek scientists. It was definitely Earth scientists, and that is supported later on in the story. I forgot about how this story ends. So it was definitely Earth scientists, but it was vague how it was written initially. Basically, it's producing this substance, and if it keeps producing this stuff, they can't stop it, and it's gonna blow up, and it's gonna create it's gonna be basically a giant atom bomb, and it's gonna blow them all up. Which, interestingly enough, I think in the lore of Skaro, according to the Dalek book, the Daleks already are like radioactive. They are the results of atomic bomb mutations, I think, already. It's kind of interesting to think about. The Doctor, I mean, he's sitting here justifying it. This is an interesting thing, because it says, like, well, if Skaro blows up, actually it'll create a bunch of radioactive dust that'll probably kill all of the humans, and so that's why it's bad. Well, I don't care if all the Daleks get destroyed, or the home planet. Also, it's bizarre to me they never mention the Talls in some of this. There are humanoids called the Talls on the planet who are good. They're good people. This would probably destroy the Tall, because you're destroying the Skaro. This would blow up Skaro. You would destroy the Talls. You'd think maybe that'd be his first concern, even if he doesn't care about the Daleks being blown up. But I think he would. At this point in the story, I don't know. First Doctor was kind of apathetic in a lot of ways, I will say. Oh, also, the Emperor sends like a Dalek to basically demonstrate why they can't turn off the machine. And so the Emperor sends this Dalek just to get vaporized, just to get blown up. Well, it's spelled vaporizing wrong. Vaporing the Dalek. I don't know. Maybe that's a British term. Maybe vaporing actually is like a British term that makes sense to you weirdo Brits. So I found this card specific to be really fascinating. So they know exactly how much time is left in order to it's like 7 minutes, 9 minutes, something like that. They've calculated it. They're like, oh, we need to solve this problem in a minimal amount of time. Doctor Who orders a Dalek suicide squadron to bomb the machine. The Daleks are quickly briefed, strapped into their rocket ships, which carry explosives that cannot set off the machine's neutronium, and then take off with ear-splitting roars. This is insane lore. You know what I mean? The Doctor would never do this. Never create a Dalek Suicide Squadron, but he does that. He's like, "Oh, let's go ahead, guys. You just send yourselves flying into the machine." And that's exactly what they do. It's not even like oh, they just said that, but he didn't really want them to do that. But no, they literally dive their planes. They strap into planes and then they dive straight into the machine and blow up. Doctor Who admires the courage of these suicide Daleks as they destroy themselves in the effort to smash the terrible machine. Wow, dude. Doctor Who's condoning suicide bombers. That's crazy. That's crazy. So essentially, this story, and this is kind of the wrap-up of the story, the Doctor just decides to approach the neutronium bomb himself, and the story ends kind of a little unspectacularly, but I will say the artwork's kind of cool of him just approaching the thing, and he basically just approaches it and pulls a lever, and it's like it's zapping kind of around him. There's these death rays. They're like the thing that vaporized the Dalek, obviously. They're zapping around, but they don't hit him, and he just pulls the lever and turns it off. Oh, you know what? I was justifying this earlier to mean that like definitely Earth scientists invented this, but I guess the way this is worded. So the idea, the reason he was able to do this, he says, is because the machine was created. The death rays were just to specifically destroy Daleks and not anything else. Okay. I kind of took that to mean that maybe Earth scientists developed that, like they intended Earth people to develop it, because they could not have known that an Earthman would go near the machine. There's a lot of weirdness about this. I mean, they're referring to the Doctor is not an Earthman. It's interesting. They refer to him as an Earthman. He's not. But you can kind of see where maybe like you have the roots of the Peter Cushing film where they do make the Doctor an Earthman. But in Doctor Who, no, he is an alien. I feel like that's established really early on. They establish he is definitely an alien, and Susan is an alien. They are not Earth people, but I don't know. Yeah, so that's that. But yeah, I guess it could be meaning that Dalek scientists developed it, which makes more sense, because why would Earth people be developing a neutronium creating thing on Skaro? And then they hold a banquet for him. That's so nice of them. Wow. The Daleks are so sweet. They're so sweet. They're so nice. That's Doctor Who and the Daleks, the Cadet Sweet Cigarette Card story. This is a weird one. It's different from the Dalek book in that it does feature the Doctor, and so we can sort of place it in the canon, and you know, as I stated, I don't have a specific place, because if I'm going based off purely the television show, there is no point in the television show where the first Doctor travels alone. It just doesn't happen. So it's really hard to place that. It's hard to place it prior to him landing in 1963. So the first episode of the series, because between him leaving Gallifrey and arriving on Earth, he would be traveling with Susan, which would imply that Susan should probably be present in this story. But she's not. And also just the pure fact that he's meeting the Daleks, he's meeting the Vord, and then when we get to them in the story, he doesn't know who they are. Is a little weird. It's pretty difficult to reconcile that fact. But it is what it is. And that's the Doctor Who and the Daleks, the candy cigarette cards, okay? I guess there's not really much else to say about these. It's a cute little story. Again, I think it's written by the same people who did the Dalek book. Probably David Whittaker, Terry Nation, I believe, who were the ones who did that. or did the Dalek book, so I suppose they also wrote this. I wouldn't be surprised if they got the same artist, but there's obviously no artist seemingly credited here, so I don't know. I mean, there's no author credited either, but it's interesting to me that these cards have, you know, I do have a fascination with, like, I've watched a lot of videos about, like, lost media and stuff like that, and it is interesting when, like, stuff like this that you'd think would be forgotten by time, just because they're just, like, stupid cards that came in, like, packs of candy. And it's like, no, people still remember these, and they are, like, they're sold on auction. Like, you can buy these on eBay. You can buy a complete collection of these. Like, they're collector's items. You know, it's bizarre. But at the same time, I also want to kind of talk about the fact that, like, I feel like the internet is changing a lot, because I remember when I was, like, you know, years ago, when I was getting into Doctor Who extended media, that iSpider site that I showed you, I used to use to just look up, because I found it interesting to be like, oh, what if I read these things in order? And I actually tried that for a while, to just, like, to do everything in order, to just see how that would hit me. If, like, I'd get, like, this crazy, like, complete storyline. But realistically, what I got was a lot of stories trying to, like, push their way in between the established margins of the television stories. And the television stories are obviously not going to acknowledge a lot of this other stuff. There's a few times where there's some interesting things that happened. There was one story early on in the First Doctor era where they talk about a planet that exists in the fourth dimension. And there's literally a audio drama that is them going to that planet and having an adventure on that planet, him and Susan alone, having and let me look this up, because I'll know when I see it. Yeah, this is it, Keenis. So he talks about the planet Keenis in, like, I think it was the Edge of Destruction. I think it was this serial where he, like, mentions the planet Keenis in the fourth dimension. It was just like an offhand, like, line that he says. He's like, oh yes, that's the planet Keenis. We can go visit the planet Keenis in the fourth dimension. And then so in Big Finish, they actually made a story about them traveling to Keenis, like, before that, so that it explains why the Doctor would know about the planet Keenis in the fourth dimension, and, like, what that would mean. So it's like stuff like that is kind of fun, you know. It's kind of a fun little, like, thing. But I think just generally some of this stuff is really just fascinating in the context of, like, whether or not you actually enjoy the storyline itself. Some of this stuff does feature a lot of crossovers between other versions of the Doctor. I think one of the more standout ones out of these, I mean, other than 7 to 1, which is, you can only really appreciate if you know all of the Doctors. But a big hand for the Doctor, I think we'll get to eventually. I guess I'm getting ahead of myself, but a big hand for the Doctor was written by the same guy who did the Artemis Fowl books. Ewan Colfer wrote this story, and it's real weird. But I think, yeah, out of the early ones, that's one of the ones I found most interesting. But I did try to read these in order. But anyways, I guess that's gonna end episode 2. The next thing we're gonna do, I believe, I want to cover some TV comic stories. I think that's gonna be where we're gonna go next, but I don't know. It's the original TV comic stories, which are gonna be, like, way down here. I can show you these on these. So the Klepton Parasites is definitely going to be, like, the first one we're going to visit, but I don't know if I'm just going to cover that one or if I'm going to cover a bunch of these. I'm just going to have to see, I guess. But that is going to be the next thing for sure. It's just going to depend on, like, how long it is and how involved. So, yeah, look forward to that, and I will see you guys next time. Goodbye.